The Lowland Logic. Merrick stood in the heart of the Moravian lowlands, the horizon a perfect rectangle of gold and green. As a senior representative for Agrozet, his sales pitch was usually seamless, but today, the prototype harvester sat motionless. The sun beat down on the massive machine, casting long shadows across the dusty ground. He wiped sweat from his brow, knowing the regional director was watching. The pressure was immense. This was a high-stakes demonstration that could decide the company's future in the region. A small, dusty car pulled up, and Soren stepped out. He was a software engineer with a reputation for taming the most rebellious operating systems. As he opened his door, the warm breeze carried the scent of a nearby brewery, the rich, heavy aroma of yeast and amber malt. Soren didn't look like a field technician. He carried a ruggedized laptop like it was a sacred relic. He gave Merrick a curt nod, his eyes already scanning the harvester's external sensors for any obvious signs of trouble. "It's the autonomous navigation," Merrick explained, walking Soren toward the cab. "The machine stops every 10 meters, claiming there's an obstacle where there is only air." He pointed toward the distant hills, where the famous treetop walk spiraled into the sky. "The stakes are high, Soren. If we don't finish this demo by sunset, the contract goes to our competitors." Soren climbed into the cab, his fingers already dancing across the keyboard to access the machine's central nervous system. Merrick stepped back down to inspect the intake valves. He found his biggest pet peeve, a buildup of fine, organic dust. "It's a clog," Merrick shouted up to the cabin. He pulled out a fine metal mesh filter that was completely obscured by grime. This kind of neglect during the pre-run was exactly what Marek hated. The sensor was clogged, sending false signals to the computer, but Soren's screen was showing something even more complicated than a simple blockage. "The clog is only half the battle," Soren called out. On his screen, a bright red rhombus icon pulsed rhythmically. "There's a fatal flaw in the sensor's logic. It's programmed to neglect the peripheral data when the central feed is interrupted." Soren sighed, realizing the software was trying to compensate for the dirt by overcalculating the distance to the horizon. It was a classic case of digital overcorrection, a mistake born from a lack of thoroughness in the initial coding phase. Merrick climbed back up, holding an oblong metal casing he had just unscrewed. "Can you bypass it?" he asked. Soren pointed to a diagram on his screen showing the secondary axis of the GPS module. "I can, but I need the physical sensor to be perfectly clear of any vacuum pressure," Soren replied. They both looked at the specialized vent. It was deep within the machine's frame, and they lacked the specific suction tool needed to clear it without dismantling the entire housing. The clock was ticking. Soren looked at the farthest point of the field, then at the furthest reaches of the code on his screen. "We need a vacuum," Soren muttered. "Something to pull the air out of that valve so the sensor resets its baseline." Merrick suddenly remembered something he had in the trunk of his service vehicle, an emergency kit he'd bought from a hardware store clearing out its stock the week before. It was unconventional, but they were out of options. Merrick returned running, carrying a bright orange toilet plunger. Soren stared at him, bewildered. "Don't let it distract you," Merrick barked, a desperate plan forming. He pressed the rubber suction cup against the oblong vent, using the smooth tiles of the harvester's heat shield to create a seal. He pumped the handle vigorously. It was a ridiculous sight, but the suction was exactly what the clogged valve needed to release the trapped particles. Suddenly, the engine roared to life with a deep, rhythmic thrum. The red rhombus on Soren's screen turned a steady, calming green. Merrick stepped back, a massive grin spreading across his face as the harvester began to move forward with grace. They had succeeded. By combining Soren's digital taming of the code with Merrick's blunt, mechanical ingenuity, the machine was finally behaving. The agromaster moved through the wheat, perfectly following its programmed path. That evening, they sat at a small tavern overlooking the lowlands. The waiter brought them bowls of steaming beef broth and slices of fresh bread. To thoroughness, Merrick toasted, his voice tender with relief. Soren nodded, realizing that his earlier negligence in checking the hardware interface was just as bad as the mechanical clog. They had saved the deal, proving that even in the world of high-tech farming, sometimes you just need a little bit of common sense and a very good plunger.